The desolation stretched for miles. Gray clouds hung low, shrouding the once vibrant plains of Zerath 7 in oppressive gloom. Jake Marlowe, a medic with the United Terran Alliance, trudged through the mud, scanning for survivors. His boots splashed through crimson puddles, some rainwater, some blood. The clash between the Alliance and the Zerathian hegemony had left its scars on the land and its people. He had no love for the Zerathians. They were an alien race, six-limbed and lithe, with shimmering cerulean skin and glinting, cat-like eyes. Their technology far surpassed humanity's, and their sudden invasion had nearly brought Earth to its knees. But Jake's oath as a medic knew no bounds. He saved lives, regardless of who or what they belonged to. A faint, gurgling sound caught his ear. He pivoted, his med scanner lighting up with an amber pulse. There, half buried under the shattered wing of a Zerathian starfighter, lay one of the enemy. Her form was unmistakably feminine, even by human standards. Blood, silver like mercury, dripped from a deep gash across her abdomen. Her breaths were shallow, her eyes fluttering. Jake hesitated, his instincts warring with duty. Then he knelt. "You're lucky I'm the one who found you," he muttered, pulling out his medkit. The alien's eyes flickered open, focusing on him with a mix of confusion and defiance. "Don't touch me," she rasped in heavily accented galactic common. "Yeah, sure, just lie there and die. That'll show me," he replied, injecting a coagulant into her wound. The Zerathian shuddered but didn't resist. As he worked, Jake noticed something unusual. Her blood, though metallic in sheen, reacted to his tools in unexpected ways, coagulating faster than anticipated. The medkit sensors chirped in alarm as her vitals stabilized far quicker than they should have. "Strange biology," he muttered, wiping his brow. "You're lucky you're built tougher than us." The alien's lips curled into a faint smirk before she slipped into unconsciousness. The Zerathian's name was Lyria V. a captain in the hegemony's military. Jake learned this when she regained consciousness 2 days later in the Alliance's makeshift medbay. She was still weak, her wounds barely healed, but her fiery demeanor hadn't dimmed. "You should have left me to die," she hissed, glaring at him. Jake leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. "You're welcome, by the way. Saving you nearly got me court-martialed. Your people are fools if they punish compassion." Jake snorted. "Yeah, well, compassion doesn't win wars. But I couldn't just leave you there." Lyria fell silent, her gaze drifting to the sterile ceiling. "Why? Your kind hates us. We are enemies." "Maybe I'm tired of this war," Jake said quietly. "Maybe I'm tired of watching people die, human or Zerathian." Their conversation was cut short when the alarms blared. The hegemony had launched a surprise attack on the Alliance's forward base. Jake grabbed his sidearm, motioning for Lyria to stay put, but the alien soldier refused. "You saved my life. I will repay the debt," she said, grabbing a discarded plasma rifle. The two fought side by side as chaos erupted around them. Jake was struck by her precision and ferocity. Lyria, by his determination and ingenuity. Against all odds, they survived the assault, retreating into the wilderness when the base fell. Weeks passed as Jake and Lyria evaded patrols, sharing stories and rations. A tentative camaraderie formed between them, forged in the crucible of survival. But their bond deepened further when Lyria began to exhibit strange symptoms. Dizziness, nausea, and an inexplicable warmth emanating from her core. One night, as they camped beneath the twin moons of Zerath 7, Lyria confided in Jake. "Your touch, it changed something in me," she said, her voice tinged with unease. Jake frowned. "What are you talking about?" "My people's biology is adaptable," she explained. "Our genetics can merge with other species in rare cases. When you treated me, something happened. I carry part of you now." Jake stared at her, dumbfounded. "Are you saying?" Lyria nodded. "I am with child. A hybrid child." News of Lyria's condition spread when the two were eventually captured by an Alliance patrol. The revelation of a hybrid pregnancy sent shockwaves through both factions. The Alliance viewed Jake as a traitor. The hegemony saw Lyria as defiled. Both sides demanded the child's fate be decided by their respective governments. Jake and Lyria were separated, interrogated, and paraded as symbols of shame and controversy. But the child's existence also sparked a glimmer of hope. Some on both sides saw it as a bridge, a chance for peace. Others, however, viewed it as an abomination that must be destroyed. Desperate to protect their unborn child, Jake and Lyria orchestrated a daring escape from the Alliance detention center. With help from sympathetic allies, they stole a small starship and fled into the uncharted regions of space. But peace was fleeting. The hegemony and the Alliance both hunted them, each faction determined to control or eliminate the hybrid child. As they traveled from one remote colony to the next, Jake and Lyria grew closer, their bond evolving into something neither had anticipated. "I didn't ask for this," Jake admitted one night as they hid in the shadow of a gas giant. "But I wouldn't trade it for anything." Lyria placed a hand on her swelling abdomen, her gaze steady. "Neither would I." Chapter 6. The Threat Beyond. Unbeknownst to them, their flight had drawn the attention of a third force. The Architects, an ancient race that once seeded life across the galaxy. The Architects saw the hybrid child as a key to reigniting their long-dormant experiments, and they would stop at nothing to claim it. As Jake and Lyria prepared for their final stand, they realized their child was more than just a symbol. The hybrid held the potential to unlock a future where humanity and Zarathians might coexist, or one where both species would perish. The silence of deep space was deceptive. As Jake adjusted the ship's rudimentary cloaking system, Lyria watched the star-speckled void through the viewport. Her hand rested protectively on her abdomen, now noticeably swollen. "We've been running for weeks," she said, her voice soft but edged with frustration. "Sooner or later, they'll catch us." "They won't," Jake replied, though the strain in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. "Not if I can help it." Lyria turned to him, her cat-like eyes narrowing. "You feel it too, don't you? The presence. We're being hunted." Jake paused. He had felt it, a gnawing sensation at the edges of his consciousness, as though unseen eyes were watching. It wasn't just the Alliance or the hegemony. This was something else. Something older. "We need to know what we're up against," he said finally. "I'm setting a course for Orthan Prime." Lyria's eyes widened. Orthan Prime? That system was abandoned centuries ago. Nothing lives there. "Exactly," Jake said. "If anyone has answers about what's happening to you, to the child, it's the data vaults on Orthan. The place is crawling with ancient tech. If we're lucky, we'll find something useful before anyone else finds us." Orthan Prime was a desolate planet orbiting a dying star. Its surface was covered in vast, rust-colored ruins, remnants of a once thriving civilization that had mysteriously vanished millennia ago. As Jake landed their ship on a crumbling landing pad, the eerie stillness of the place sent shivers down his spine. "This place feels wrong," Lyria murmured, clutching her rifle. Jake nodded but said nothing. He activated a scanning drone, which began mapping the area, its blinking light casting long shadows across the ruins. Hours passed as they explored the labyrinthine halls of an ancient citadel. Finally, they stumbled upon a central chamber filled with crystalline nodes and holographic projectors. Jake's scanner beeped wildly. "This is it," he said, powering up the nearest terminal. The room hummed to life, and a ghostly figure appeared. A projection of an architect. Its elongated form was draped in flowing robes, its face obscured by a mask of shifting light. "Welcome, travelers," the architect intoned in a voice that resonated in their minds. "You seek knowledge of the convergence." Jake and Lyria exchanged a glance. "Convergence?" Jake asked. "The union of disparate forms," the architect explained. "Your child represents a phenomenon long foreseen, an evolutionary leap catalyzed by the blending of your species. Such a union holds the potential to transcend the limitations of both your kinds." Lyria stepped forward, her tone sharp. "Why are we being hunted? Why does this child matter so much?" The architect hesitated, as though weighing its response. "The hybrid disrupts the balance. Some would see it destroyed to preserve the status quo. Others would wield it as a weapon. We, the architects, seek to protect it for its may be the key to restoring what was lost. What do you mean, what was lost? Jake pressed. But before the architect could answer, the chamber shook violently. An explosion reverberated through the ruins, and alarms blared from Jake's scanner. "They found us," he shouted, grabbing Lyria's arm. As they sprinted back to their ship, they were ambushed by a hegemony strike team. Lyria froze as she recognized the leader, Commander Vale, her former superior. Lyria V. Threen, Vale sneered, his weapon trained on her. "You've disgraced your people for the last time." "Vale, listen to me," Lyria said, raising her hands. "This child is not a threat. It's a chance for peace." "Peace?" Vale scoffed. "The Alliance wants us extinct. This abomination will not save us. It will doom us." Jake stepped forward, his sidearm drawn. "Touch her and I'll—" A plasma bolt cut him off, grazing his shoulder. He stumbled but fired back, forcing the hegemony soldiers to take cover. Lyria seized the moment, unleashing a barrage of precise shots that felled two of her attackers. "Go!" she shouted to Jake. "Get to the ship." "No way I'm leaving you," he yelled, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the docking bay. They barely made it aboard their ship before another volley of plasma fire scorched the hull. As Jake launched them into orbit, Lyria activated the shields, her fingers dancing over the console. "Where do we go now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jake glanced at the NAV display, his jaw tightening. "The only place they won't follow us, the rift." Lyria's eyes widened in horror. "You can't be serious. The rift is madness. No ship has ever come back from there. Do you have a better idea?" The ship's engines roared as they entered the coordinates. Behind them, a hegemony warship closed in, its weapons charging. "Hold on," Jake said, gripping the controls. "This is going to be rough." The stars stretched and blurred as they plunged into the rift, a swirling vortex of energy and light. The ship groaned under the strain, warning lights flashing across the cockpit. As they tumbled into the unknown, Lyria clutched her abdomen, a pained expression crossing her face. "Jake, something's happening." The rift was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The ship floated in a sea of shifting colors, time and space warping around them. Lyria's breathing grew labored, and Jake's heart pounded as he saw faint, glowing tendrils of energy spiraling around her. "What's happening to you?" he asked, his voice panicked. Lyria's eyes glowed faintly as she gasped, "The child. It's responding to the rift." Suddenly, the ship's systems flickered, and a new voice filled the cabin, a cold, mechanical tone. "Welcome to the Nexus. Prepare for assimilation." Jake and Lyria turned to see a massive, biomechanical structure materializing in the rift. It pulsed with a sinister light, its spires reaching out like claws. "What the hell is that?" Jake muttered, his knuckles white on the controls. "The architects," Lyria whispered, "but not as they once were. Something has corrupted them." As the ship was pulled toward the Nexus, the glowing energy around Lyria intensified. Her voice grew steady, almost otherworldly. "We're not just running anymore," she said, her gaze meeting Jake's. "We're fighting back." The ship trembled as the Nexus drew it closer, its gravitational pull like an invisible hand wrenching them toward the biomechanical monolith. Jake fought the controls, but resistance was futile. Alarms blared, warning of hull strain as the vessel was enveloped by a cocoon of pulsing light. "Brace yourself," Jake shouted, gripping the console as the ship lurched forward. The light surrounding them shattered like glass, and suddenly they were inside. The Nexus was a cavernous void, its interior lined with shifting, biomechanical walls that pulsed like the veins of a living organism. Tendrils of energy reached out, probing the ship as if testing its strength. Lyria clutched her abdomen, her breathing sharp and uneven. "The child, it's resonating with this place. I feel it." Jake glanced at her, his heart pounding. "We need to get out of here before this thing tears us apart." But before he could act, the ship powered down completely. The cockpit went dark, save for the faint glow of the Nexus's interior filtering through the viewport. "We're not going anywhere," Lyria said grimly. The cold, mechanical voice from before echoed through the cabin again, this time louder, clearer. Subject Lyria V. Threen. Subject Jake Marlowe. Welcome to the Nexus. Your convergence is the key to our restoration. Jake stood, his sidearm drawn. Who are you? What do you want from us? A figure materialized before them, projected in the same eerie, flickering light as the architect they had encountered on Orton Prime. But this entity was different. Its form was fractured, distorted, its voice layered with static. We are the architects, it said. We were the creators, the stewards of life across the galaxy. But we were betrayed by our own creations, consumed by the very systems we designed to maintain balance. Now, only fragments of us remain, corrupted and incomplete. Corrupted by what? Lyria demanded, her voice strong despite the pain coursing through her. The figure hesitated. An anomaly. A convergence like yours. It destabilized our systems, fracturing our unity. Your child carries the same potential, to destroy or to heal. The rift awakened its latent abilities, and now we must harness them to complete our restoration. Jake tightened his grip on his weapon. You mean you want to use our child as a tool? As a vessel, the architect corrected. It is the only path to survival for us and for your species. Jake's jaw clenched. That's not happening. Whatever you are, you're not getting your hands on our kid. The projection's flickering gaze shifted to Lyria. Your body is already adapting to the child's transformation. Soon, it will no longer be yours to control. Lyria's eyes glowed faintly, the energy radiating from her abdomen intensifying. You underestimate me, she said coldly. Without warning, the ship's systems flickered back to life. The console lit up, and Jake's scanners detected a faint power surge emanating from Lyria. You're doing that? Jake asked, amazed. I think so, she replied, her voice strained but resolute. The child, it's giving me strength. The Nexus trembled, its walls pulsing erratically. The projection flickered and warped, its voice crackling. You cannot resist. The Nexus is absolute. Watch us, Jake growled, slamming the thrusters. The ship lurched forward, tearing free of the Nexus's tendrils. Alarms blared as the vessel shuddered under the strain, but the glowing energy surrounding Lyria seemed to shield them from the worst of it. As they hurtled toward the rift's edge, a swarm of biomechanical drones emerged from the Nexus, their sleek forms bristling with weaponry. We've got company, Jake shouted, angling the ship into evasive maneuvers. Lyria moved to the weapons console, her fingers flying over the controls. Let's see if this power works for me too. The ship's plasma cannons roared to life, firing bursts of energy more powerful than anything Jake had seen before. The drones exploded in flashes of light, but more swarmed in to replace them. This isn't sustainable, Jake said, gritting his teeth as he dodged another barrage. We need an exit. Lyria's eyes glowed brighter, and her voice took on an otherworldly tone. Trust me. The rift loomed ahead, a swirling maelstrom of energy that seemed to call to them. Jake hesitated, his instincts screaming that entering the rift again could be suicide. Lyria, do it, she said, her voice steady. It's the only way. Jake didn't argue. He punched the coordinates and throttled the engines, plunging them into the rift just as the drones closed in. The transition was immediate and violent. The ship spun wildly, its systems struggling to stabilize. Lyria cried out, the glowing energy around her expanding in a blinding wave that engulfed the cockpit. Then, everything went still. When Jake opened his eyes, he found himself floating in an endless expanse of light. Lyria was beside him, her form shimmering like a star. Where are we? He asked, his voice echoing in the void. We're inside the rift, Lyria replied, her gaze fixed ahead. Or maybe it's inside us. Before them, a figure emerged, tall, luminous, and unmistakably architect in origin. But this being felt whole, uncorrupted. You have passed the threshold, it said. The choice is now yours. What choice? Jake demanded. To reshape the galaxy, the being replied. Your child is the bridge between worlds, the convergence of life. With its power, you can end the cycle of war and division, or let it consume all that remains. Lyria looked down at her abdomen, her expression unreadable. And if we refuse? The being's light dimmed. Then the Nexus will find another way. It always does. Jake stepped forward, his fists clenched. We're not letting anyone use our child. Not the Nexus, not the architects, no one. Lyria met his gaze, her determination matching his. Then we fight. The light around them pulsed, and the being's voice resonated one final time. Very well. But beware, true power comes at a price. The blinding light faded, and Jake and Lyria found themselves back aboard their ship, adrift in the void. The cockpit systems flickered to life, and the swirling rift outside the viewport slowly began to dissolve, leaving behind the dark, cold expanse of space. What just happened? Jake muttered, gripping the controls. Lyria's breathing was ragged. Her glowing aura had dimmed, but faint pulses of light still emanated from her abdomen. I don't know, but I feel it. The child, it's stronger now. Before Jake could respond, the ship's proximity alarms blared. A massive object emerged from the darkness ahead, a hulking, biomechanical warship, unmistakably part of the Nexus. Its surface writhed with shifting metallic tendrils, and its energy signature made the ship's sensors go haywire. We didn't escape, Jake muttered, his stomach sinking. It let us go, so it could follow. Lyria's eyes narrowed. Then we make our stand. The Nexus warship loomed closer, its spires glowing with an ominous red light. Jake's fingers flew over the controls, diverting power to shields and weapons. Lyria manned the targeting systems, her movements precise despite the strain evident on her face. They'll come at us with everything they have, she said, her voice steady. Let them, Jake replied, steering the ship into an evasive arc. We've faced worse. The first volley of energy blasts streaked toward them, but Jake's quick maneuvers sent the shots spiraling into the void. Lyria returned fire, her enhanced abilities amplifying the ship's weapons. The plasma bolts tore through the Nexus warship's outer defenses, but the damage barely slowed it down. It's adapting, Lyria warned. The Nexus retaliated with a swarm of drones, their sleek forms weaving through space like a school of predatory fish. Jake pushed the ship to its limits, spinning and diving as Lyria unleashed a barrage of firepower. We can't keep this up, Jake shouted as the ship shuddered under the strain of incoming fire. Lyria closed her eyes, her hands glowing faintly as they hovered over the weapon's console. I can feel the child's energy. I can channel it. Are you sure that's safe? Jake asked, panic rising in his voice. No, she admitted, but it's the only way. With a deep breath, Lyria placed her hands on the console. A surge of energy rippled through the ship, and its weapons systems glowed with an otherworldly light. The next plasma volley erupted with devastating force, obliterating the incoming drones and punching a massive hole in the Nexus warship's hull. Jake stared at the destruction in awe. That's new. But the victory was short-lived. The Nexus warship began to regenerate, its damaged sections knitting together with alarming speed. It's learning, Lyria said, her voice tinged with frustration. As the Nexus warship pressed its assault, Jake noticed something on the ship's scanners, a faint signal emanating from deep within the enemy vessel. It was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. What is that? He murmured, zooming in on the signal. Lyria's eyes widened. The core, the Nexus's power source. If we destroy it, we might have a chance. Jake hesitated. Getting that close would be suicide. Lyria placed a hand on his arm. We don't have a choice. Reluctantly, Jake steered their ship toward the heart of the Nexus warship, dodging wave after wave of drones. Lyria continued to channel the child's energy, unleashing bursts of power that cleared a path through the enemy's defenses. As they neared the core, the Nexus warship's defenses grew more desperate. Tendrils of energy lashed out, trying to ensnare their ship, but Lyria's enhanced abilities kept them one step ahead. Finally, they reached the core, a massive, pulsating sphere of light surrounded by shifting metallic spires. This is it, Jake said, his voice tight with determination. Lyria's glowing eyes fixed on the core. I'll handle it. Get us in position. As Jake held the ship steady, Lyria stepped to the center of the cockpit. Her entire body began to glow, the child's energy radiating outward in waves. The Nexus warship trembled, its systems faltering as Lyria's power disrupted its connection to the core. "Lyria, stop!" Jake shouted, panic in his voice. "You're going to burn yourself out." She turned to him, her expression serene. "This is the only way. Protect the child." Before Jake could stop her, Lyria unleashed a massive surge of energy. The blast ripped through the Nexus warship, shattering the core and sending shockwaves through the surrounding space. The ship was flung backward, its systems overloaded by the explosion. When the light finally faded, the Nexus warship was gone. Jake scrambled to Lyria's side, his heart pounding. She was unconscious, her body weak but still glowing faintly. "You did it," he whispered, cradling her in his arms. The ship's systems sputtered back to life, and the cockpit's view screen displayed the aftermath of the battle. The rift had closed, and the Nexus's presence was gone. For the first time in weeks, the silence of space felt peaceful. Jake set a course for the nearest safe haven, his thoughts racing. Lyria's condition was fragile, but the child's energy seemed to sustain her. He knew their journey was far from over. As they drifted through the stars, Jake glanced at Lyria, her glowing form a reminder of the impossible bond they now shared. "We've been through hell," he murmured, "but we're still here." Lyria stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She smiled faintly, her hand resting on her abdomen. "And so is the child." Jake nodded, determination filling his voice. "We'll keep fighting, for them, for us, no matter what comes next." But in the depths of space, far beyond the reach of their scanners, something stirred. The architect's presence was not entirely gone, and the galaxy's fate remained uncertain. Months passed as Jake and Lyria disappeared into the vastness of uncharted space, seeking refuge from the remnants of the Nexus, the Alliance, and the Hegemony. Their ship became a haven, the child growing steadily within Lyria, a quiet reminder of the impossible circumstances that had brought them together. Lyria's powers had faded somewhat after the battle with the Nexus, leaving her exhausted and vulnerable. But the energy of the child remained, now controlled and contained, no longer radiating unpredictably. "We can't keep running forever," Lyria said one night, her voice soft as she rested in the ship's dimly lit cabin. Jake sat beside her, his hand brushing hers. "We won't have to. Not if we find a place to start over. Somewhere no one can touch us." She smiled faintly, leaning into him. "Do you really think a place like that exists?" "It has to," Jake replied, "because if it doesn't, we'll make one." Months later, aboard a small colony ship on the fringes of known space, Lyria went into labor. The moment was fraught with tension, the ship's medical AI struggling to monitor both Lyria's unique physiology and the hybrid nature of the child. Jake stayed by her side, his heart pounding as she fought through the pain. Her shimmering skin glowed faintly, the child's energy manifesting in flashes of light that danced across the cabin walls. After hours of struggle, a sharp, clear cry filled the room. The child was born, a small, fragile being with cerulean-tinted skin like its mother, but with human features and bright, luminous eyes that seemed to hold the light of stars. Jake cradled the baby in his arms, awe and love filling his chest. "She's beautiful," he whispered, his voice breaking. Lyria, exhausted but smiling, reached for the child. "She's a bridge," she said softly, her eyes meeting Jake's, "a symbol of what's possible." Their peace was short-lived. A Hegemony scout ship tracked them down, followed by an Alliance cruiser. Both factions demanded the child, each claiming the hybrid as their property, either a tool for war or an abomination to be destroyed. Jake and Lyria refused to surrender. They called upon the alliances they had built in their travels, outcasts, refugees, and defectors who had grown tired of the endless war. Together, they mounted a defense against the incoming forces. The battle was fierce. The small colony ship was no match for the firepower of the Alliance and Hegemony fleets, but Lyria's latent powers surged as the child's energy awakened once more. She stood on the ship's bridge, her body glowing with an intensity that rivaled the rift itself. "You won't take her from us," Lyria shouted, her voice echoing across the comm channels. A massive wave of energy erupted from the ship, disabling the fleet's weapons and sending their ships into disarray. The outcasts seized the opportunity, rallying to drive the attackers back. The battle's outcome sent ripples across the galaxy. The Alliance and Hegemony, humiliated and weakened, were forced to negotiate for peace. Jake and Lyria's story became a legend, a tale of impossible love and defiance that inspired hope in a fractured galaxy. The child, named Elira, became a symbol of unity. Her unique abilities, nurtured in secret, held the potential to heal the wounds between humanity and the Zerathians. Jake and Lyria raised her on the fringes of space, teaching her the values of compassion and resilience. They knew their lives would always be shadowed by those who sought to exploit or destroy what she represented, but they faced the future with hope. Years later, Elira stood at the edge of a vibrant colony, her parents by her side. The planet was a testament to their efforts, a place where humans and Zerathians worked together, building a future free of the divisions that had once defined their worlds. As the twin suns rose over the horizon, Elira turned to her parents. Her luminous eyes reflected the light, filled with curiosity and determination. "What happens next?" she asked. Jake smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever you decide, kid. The galaxy's yours to shape." Lyria nodded, her gaze steady. "You are our hope, Elira. Make it count." And as the dawn bathed the colony in golden light, Elira stepped forward, ready to embrace her destiny. A bridge between worlds, a spark of peace in a galaxy reborn.